Ba ba bum ba 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 bum. Finally a good episode.
Oh,
Bum
come
ba ba
on. The
ba
last episode was
bum.
good.
I'm I'm very impressed with the writing of this episode. These two
Well,
episodes. It gives me hope for the show. Ba 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 ba
okay. Thanks,
ba.
Mike, for that beautiful sing along. I mean, you're not like from Mad Max, but it's great. Anyway, welcome everyone to Yelling at Gaseous Anomalies. And tonight we're actually doing 2 episodes, or 3 maybe, for the price of one, which is we're watching the Menageries Part 1 and Part 2, which is actually known as an envelope on episode where it goes over the cage. Anyway, it's Matt Ross again, and I'm here with my number one, Michael Pontone. And how are you doing tonight, Mike?
Ooh. You flatter me, Captain. Very good. Yes, I'm number one, just like Captain Pike's lady number one. I am a lady.
Unless you're in the
And
bathroom, that's a number
that
one.
is how we're going to be saying. Yes, we're going to be proceeding tonight. And Matt said, "Hey, watch out! This is a two-parter, but actually it's one episode, but it's a two-parter." And I immediately thought of a South Park episode from season 4, episode 11, where the entire time these Trekkies are debating about whether or not on how many episodes there were. Trekkers, I say
Doesn't
Trekkies. See, look, there's disputes already as to how many series episodes there were in the original series, and whether or not you should count Menagerie as 1 or 2, or as Matt said, possibly even 3. But I would say that you should count this as I would say 1 episode.
The Menagerie was a two-parter that counts as 1 episode.
Yeah, you could say it's 1 episode. I found it actually very enjoyable. I like this episode itself. What did you, since you sang that you liked it, I assume that you did like it, correct?
Yes. Let's start at the end. I thought it was fantastic. I thought right from the beginning, right from that opening shot on the planet, it was cinematic in a way that we haven't seen before.
You mean it's Starbase 11? Yes.
Starbase 11. I liked the Commodore. Again, kind of the first time they're using naval terminology, right?
Yes. That is Malachi Throne. He was in a whole bunch of things in the 60s and 70s. His voice is very theater-based, as you could tell. Some of his lines give off like I'm in a theater situation, but there's even like a black box scene. Those of you who are not familiar with plays, black boxes usually refer to black background, solid black in color with nothing in it. This has a lot of nice touches that show Star Trek's connection to the theater in some ways, which a lot of Star Trek is. They're all one-act plays, but this is almost a 3-act play, and it reuses the original pilot in between. There's a whole bunch of financial shenanigans for this, but let's go through basically what these 2 episodes are about. Did you happen to get the googly thing on it or anything on this at all? Or
I did not. I thought you were going to get it. You want me to pull it up? I'll pull it up.
I got it. TV Guide has it as a November 12th, 1966. In the first of a 2-part story, Spock inexplicably abducts crippled Captain Pike. The Enterprise's former commander locks the spaceship on course for the only forbidden planet in the galaxy, and then turns himself in for court-martial, which is then followed by the November 19th listing that says conclusion of a 2-part story. Science Officer Spock conducts his defense against mutiny charge using the weird communication method found on the planet Talos 4. Spock offers a startling reenactment of his former commander's visit to the Forbidden World. So that's a really general story, but basically what is happening is getting to the planet, the Starbase 11, they find out that this hero captain that you don't know about until this moment, named Captain Pike, gets injured and is totally incapacitated in a wheelchair. All he can do is, in fact, beep. That's the most famous thing. He's got 1 beep for no, or is it 2 beeps for no? 1 beep for no, 2 beeps for yes. And we find about Pike. This is the Pike that Strange New Worlds tries to make. someone else, but that's where we are. Do you have anything feeling about that when you got to meet Captain Pike in his wheelchair, or that entire little bit?
I thought you might make an exception for them. Captain Pike, may I remain for a moment?
I was familiar with it, obviously. It was completely as gruesome as I remembered it. It was very, very hardcore. I really was fascinated by the little beep once for yes and beep twice for no conceit. Reminded me a lot of Breaking Bad. To wit, I also expected, you could have full conversations with this guy. If he can just say Bing, you could just show him an alphabet chart and he could spell out words if he wanted to. But I appreciate that he was pretty Starfleet. Even with that infirmed, he didn't seem that depressed or incapacitated. I felt like there was a bit of dignity to him and about him, to the point where, in retrospect, when Spock is saying, hey, we'll take you to Talos 4 and we can hook you up with the Talosians and you can get some semblance of life back, he's like, no, don't do it.
It's only 6 days away at maximum warp, and I have it well planned. I have never disobeyed your orders before, Captain, but this time I must.
We're not supposed to do it. I don't want you to put yourself or your ship in danger. Very Starfleet of him. It's kind of bizarre, knowing what I know, that Spock would go that extra mile and do it, considering what kind of officer he is and the fact that he's of course, a Vulcan. But even here, we're having the discussions that we're going to have surrounding Spock's death, the good of the one versus the good of the many.
Yeah, that's a whole interesting story where, you have finally you're getting some background on this. Kirk is not the first commander of the Enterprise. Later, with the animated series, you find he's actually the third. But meeting Pike, you have to think, even though we're far in the future, he must have been really messed up, because with all their advanced technology, the best they can do is put him into a wheelchair that just beeps. It's kind of depressing when you think about it. By the way, that was played by an actor named Sean Kenny, who is actually taking over Jeff Hunter's role. He was picked because he has the same eye color and approximate size. They dyed his hair white. He said he was kind of depressed or upset because he couldn't eat solids. His face was in that makeup. He had breathing tubes while they were making the plaster of his face, and he would eat through a straw. He later becomes Lieutenant Hansen, who you'll get to meet later. But that's later.
So that was a question of mine. I did not realize that. So that was not the same actor. That was not Pike.
Now, Jeffrey Hunter is very particular. When we cover The Cage in full, which is part of this, and we're basically dancing around this, I'm going to give you some background on it. But Jeffrey Hunter, his wife was very particular about what movies, TV shows he could act in, and because he pissed everyone off, they decided not to chase after Jeffrey Hunter, and they went with William Shatner. Jeffrey Hunter's wife specifically says, well, I don't know if my Jeffrey could be in your silly sci-fi show. Jeffrey Hunter, you would see him later in, I believe, movie King of Kings, playing Jesus Christ.
Good evening. I'm playing the role of Jesus, a man once portrayed on the big screen by Jeffrey Hunter. You may remember him as the actor who was replaced by William Shatner on Star Trek. Apparently, Mr. Hunter was good enough to die for our sins, but not quite up to the task of seducing green women.
Yeah, so, you could say Jesus played the captain of the Enterprise at one point.
Jeez,
well,
died early.
Yeah, sure did.
42.
Yes, he did. Well, let's just go from one reason. Why is this basically 2 or 3 episodes mushed together? Well, Roddenberry and crew were actually kind of getting burnt out. They were writing actually a hell of a lot of episodes. This is actually longer than your typical season. This season actually has 29 episodes. Yeah, 29, 30 episodes. You could say 29 because this is a 2-parter or 1. And they needed breathing space. They needed breathing room. But
Earth Hitler, 1938.
Thanks. But what they did was they reused portions of the original pilot that didn't sell the show, and they spliced it into new materials around it. What's fascinating, see, I didn't say it. What's fascinating about this is that they went to their go-to director, Mark Daniels, who could do things really quickly, almost with no script, which is the way they seem to run all the time. He did it in 5 days. He actually did both of the first part and the second part, but they gave Robert Butler, who did The Cage, credit. Robert Butler refused to be part of this. And doing the math, because I love doing that, the funny thing is that even though Desilu was not making $100,000 or $1 million today, it saved money, $26,000, by reusing certain things, and the producers were happy about that. But so they saved $26,000 so they can do future work, and they saved a little bit of time as they were doing all these things almost simultaneously. There's one other little shenanigans in the background, which is one of the writer who they hired at first, D.F. Black. He wrote something that Roddenberry thought was trash. Roddenberry and Gene L. Kuhn, the other producer, rewrote it, and Roddenberry did several passes on it. And they got into a Writers Guild of America lawsuit with the writer Black, but Black lost, actually. And Roddenberry was like, ha! But not everyone was happy. Like later you find out when you're reading the histories. Again, our reference material is These Are the Voyages in Season 1. The editing department up and quit because they were tired of Roddenberry meddling. So there's a lot of personalities on sets. But
oh boy,
yeah.
Talk about echoes of future Trek.
Oh yeah, well the guy who played Pike said, since I couldn't move or talk and I barely breathe, I heard everyone really talking badly about Shatner. Yet Malachi Throne,
really?
Yeah, but Malachi Throne says Shatner was professional and a good jokester, and everyone seemed to like him. So, you have to wonder how much of it is BS and how much of it is ego,
No, of course. Listen, William Shatner had a career that spanned 60 years. I mean, still does. My understanding is if you're a complete unworkable jerk, you don't get that. So I'm sure that the truth is somewhere in between. But because there are plenty of actors out there, and he kept coming back to him. Speaking of which, jumping ahead a little bit, I mean, there's so much in this episode. The doctor for the Pike crew, the
Dr.
older
Piper?
gentleman, Piper.
Yes.
He is prominently featured in my favorite Twilight Zone episode, same as William Shatner. And that episode is Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? Are you familiar with that one?
Yes. Is that the one where they're in a diner? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually really good.
Dr. Piper there comes in at the end, and he's the only one left, and he pulls out 3 arms. A third arm comes out from under his coat as he starts to light a cigarette.
Yes, I do remember that.
I won't give the
one.
twist on the twist, though.
It was a good episode, but I actually like Dr. Piper. Those of you who are newer fans wondering what are us, well, for you've seen Strange New Worlds, I presume?
I've seen only the musical episode.
That's
another. No, I love the musical episode.
You're defective. Report to the agony booth, Mike.
That is another question I had. I assume that you've seen Strange New Worlds.
Yes.
So let me start. I mean, I have a million questions. Do they ever reference Dr. Piper?
Dr. Piper is only in The Cage. So you have to keep in mind, what our audience is, since we're jumping all over the place, before we get into did we reference Dr. Piper, let's start at the beginning. The Enterprise gets called or comes to Starbase 11 saying they were called here by Starfleet operations to get here, and everyone's saying, like, what are you talking about? We have no record of this. There's a question of whether or not there was some forgery of computer records. Why, only a computer expert could do that, Kirk even says in an office scene with the Commodore of the station, Malachi Throne. It's actually Commodore Mendez, Jose Mendez. By the way, this is not the same Jose from the Man Trap. That's Jose Dominguez, who wanted peppers. And as we all know in Star Trek, you don't mess with a man's peppers.
Space Commander Dominguez says we have supplies he urgently needs.
Tell Jose he'll get us chili peppers when we get there.
Nobody touches my peppers.
But
yes,
this they're trying to figure out what's going on. It all seems to point to Spock, and you actually get hints of it. Spock talking to the now hurt Captain Pike, and the Enterprise is stolen along with Captain Pike. Stolen because Mr. Spock sabotages the computer systems inside the starbase to program the Enterprise to go on a trip to a planet that's banned for everyone to go to under penalty of death. Did you get excited to see that, or have any thoughts like how could this planet be quarantined, or did you already know what they were talking about?
No, I didn't, and I was very surprised by many different things. Firstly, Spock doing a subterfuge and essentially stealing the Enterprise reminded me, obviously, of the classic TNG episode where Data basically does the same, imitates Picard's voice, locks everyone out, and then goes to meet up with Lore. You remember that episode?
Yes, that's called Brothers. It's
Yes.
that's the episode where the ridiculous password code. There's some great videos in song where there's a guy who sings that.
7 3 4 6 7 3 2 1 4 7 6 Charlie 3 2 7 8 9 7 7 7 6 4 3 Tango 7 3 2 Victor 7 3 1 1 7 8 8 8 7 3 2 4 7 6 7 8 9 7 6 4 3 7 6 Lock.
But it's actually they are very similar in that regard. But at this point, you're like, oh my God, Spock in episode 10 or 11 is actually stealing the Enterprise, and then Kirk and Commodore Mendez chase after them in a shuttlecraft, which I guess is probably not a good idea because they're usually short range.
Well, they're banking appropriately that Spock is not going to let them die.
That is true, but you did have to wonder, is he going to let them die? McCoy, by the way, does meet Captain Pike on the ship. I think it's also funny, by the way, before they actually leave, when they recall McCoy to the ship, you see his like disdain for the crew going like, it's probably a hangnail that I need to get back to the ship. Like, come on, give me a break for 5 minutes.
Somebody discovered a hangnail. I'll beam up, let you know, Jim.
So it makes you wonder how many hypochondriacs are on the Enterprise. What do you think, Mike? Is there at least like 3? Some guy going, Doctor, I got a headache again. That's all I'm thinking when I saw that. Or no impression on that?
Yes. Oh, I don't
With
know.
McCoy.
You went all over the place.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I thought it was funny with McCoy, like, being annoyed that he had to get recalled to the ship because, someone's got a hangnail. I thought that was kind of funny. But,
Well, he's just doing the grumpy old doctor.
He is a grumpy old doctor. God darn it. They are chasing the ship. Spock brings them aboard. McCoy humorously arrests Mr. Spock because he is the senior ranking officer. He's lieutenant commander. Although he's not a line officer, that's why that other guy is left in command of the ship. And Kirk comes aboard, and they realize they're heading to the banned planet Talos 4, a mysterious planet that only the Enterprise has ever been in. And then we have our court-martial, and we get to basically see something with Spock's presenting, saying, well, actually what happens is the Commodore says, I want to know why you're doing this. Because it's an open-ended question, counselor. Of course you can have, as I likingly say, diarrhea of the mouth, and Spock presents the entire story. So remember that for trials, boys and girls. When you ask an open-ended question, you're going to get an open-ended answer, and that's what we saw. That's true.
Yes. Less is more in most things in the legal field. Let everyone know. Now, speaking of which, very strange. This is the first time I've ever heard of the Federation being willing to execute anyone.
But still not the Federation.
And also...
Starfleet.
Well,
Yes.
Humanity. And also, wasn't there a something similar in later Trek in... I never saw it, but I heard tell of it in Voyager, something called the Omega Particles?
Yes, that's I can't remember the name of that episode. There was the Omega directive where you have to destroy the Omega particle because it could destroy subspace and a whole bunch of stuff, and everything turns to the symbol Omega on the bridge. And Janeway says, "Well, we got to stop right here. Heck, going home, we got to stop and get this particle."
I gotta say, jumping ahead to kind of the explanation, I was a little fuzzy, and again, with this series, I never know if I missed something or if they just stopped writing. Why Did the Federation have a go there and you die rule?
Well, that's because it relates to the later in the story where we get to Talos 4. You discover that the aliens, the Talosians, are able to make illusions so strong and so real um, that you can be fooled into anything. That you could even destroy yourselves because they make you think you're like activating something when you're not, or doing something when you're not, thinking you're someplace else. So they could actually destroy your ship by having you hit a whole bunch of buttons and you don't realize you just set the self destruct. Also, they were afraid that as the Telosians themselves destroyed themselves and said, you discover that the power of illusion is like a narcotic, and you would become addicted to it and kill each other for it, which is what happened to the Telosians on that planet. So that's why it's banned. Also makes a good drama. But when they're flying to Talos, they get to see a video essentially of what happened 13 years prior when Spock was on that ship. They had number one, or Una, as Strange New Worlds calls her, which also means one. How creative. And Captain Pike, as they're flying through space, coming from a mission to Rigel 7 where they just got their butts kicked on a ground combat situation. Pike is burnt out, says he wants to pretty much quit, and that's when they're getting these distress signals. What did you think of Pike being such a downer, saying, I want to quit, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Very much different character than Kirk. Shows that he's a little bit more introspective, maybe a little bit more, good leader, but a little bit less whimsical about his time in space. I like how Piper comes in, mixes him a martini. I mean, obviously, suggesting what the future relationship with McCoy and Kirk are going to be, except maybe like kind of a bit of a role reversal, where McCoy is the more pessimistic one and they make Kirk the more optimistic one. I gotta say, his number one, they did amazing casting with Rebecca Romaine. She looks pretty darn close.
Majel Barrett? Kind of, yeah.
And yeah. And I dig the number one. I think that she is a good commanding officer from the little that we see. And yeah, everything just looks so much cleaner, because a lot of the earlier episodes that we've seen look way crappier. Like, just in terms of their production quality and the costumes and everything.
Well, they did have a little bit more money. This is a pilot idea in some regards.
I was about to say, I wrote that down. Did they have much more money for the pilot than they did the other episodes?
Yes, they did. And actually, I believe the cinematographer was the same guy who did Gone with the Wind. You might have heard of it. So the thing that's
very impressive.
But there is some things that are different. Like, it's pretty dull in the colors. It's blues and grays and dull yellow, as opposed to having like wood tones and red and pink and orange throughout each and every episode of the actual series itself. Interesting conversation between Piper and Pike. Pike says, I'm tired of deciding who stays and who goes, who lives and who dies. It's actually one of my favorite lines. That, and there's some things people will tell their bartender that they'll never tell their doctor when he's mixing their drinks. It's a good relationship. At least they kept the booze with McCoy, so that's at least a positive. They actually then get a second distress signal. They get to Talos. They find an encampment of very stoically surviving humans. And we meet Vina, played by the very beautiful Susan Oliver, who was the it girl of the time.
Yeah, that was a weird, quick little illusion. I'm glad that they abandoned it pretty quickly. A bunch of ugly old men and one pristine blonde. I was just like, oh no. It's true, because like these aliens, they're aliens. They don't exactly know what people are. And anyone else is like, oh man, this looks real dicey. They're like, nah, it's good. These are what survivors would look like, right?
That's what you have in your mind. And that's when the Telosians come out. They capture Captain Pike, and and they take them away. And the crew fires phasers at where they went, but nothing happens. Or so you think, or maybe. And then we get to the commercial, and we come back to the ship.
Yeah, I love the design of the Talosians. Nice, good alien look. Looks a bit like Balak.
Balak, a little,
From
yeah.
last-
But if you take... Go ahead. From
No,
last episode?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a dummy. By the way, was one of those Talosians a lady?
They're actually, I believe, all women. But if you take
Really?
a look really carefully, yeah. If you look carefully, also the veins in their heads pulse.
Ah, yes.
But this is also what's different from the cage, is this is pieces of the cage. It's not 100% of the episode. Meanwhile, back in the, quote, present, they ask, like, is this accurate? Is this some great theater? As Malachi Thrones Commodore Mendez says. Pike beeps, yes, this is actual real. And they're watching what's going on with Pike. The ship tries to decide what to do. The doctor, Piper, very smartly says, listen, let me get this straight. These guys use illusion. They could be showing us anything, and they could make us destroy ourselves if we're not careful. But they head down anyway to try and rescue the captain, and they take like a phaser cannon or laser cannon, and they somehow beam their weapon systems down there, and they can't get to him. But that's even the doctor says again, listen, I warned you. We could have broken the entire entrance, but we have no idea, if we're actually seeing what's real. It's kind of freaky if you think about it. You imagine like what you're seeing is not actually there. Who knows? That could be also why Talos is banned. How would you know what the hell you're doing? What do you think?
I suppose, but it doesn't seem like they've got any inherent, malediction or some sort of negative influence or negative motivation, right? It just seems strange that they would have the death penalty for this. That being said, it is, or maybe it's just something where they want to keep them away, so they make it a big taboo and they wouldn't actually go through with it. This also reminded me, in terms of all the allusions to future Trek, like the Brothers episode, this reminded me of Clues in no small amount, where there's some planet and some alien race that's so dangerous that we're not even supposed to know about it.
Well, that's true, but that's again that's an outside force. That wasn't banned by the organization these
Correct.
people are in. This one, though, I could see it. I mean, yeah, they don't seem to have malediction except for wanting a race of slaves. So, yeah, I don't know.
I still was kind of fuzzy about that. Why did they want us? Why did they want people?
They wanted to revitalize their planet that they destroyed themselves by fighting over their powers of illusion. So what they wanted to do is they wanted everything. They wanted them to grow food on the planet, to reclaim the surface, to make everything the way it was, and they would be in charge with their power of illusion. As Susan Oliver's Vina says, is that they fought a war, they destroyed everything, and they got so wrapped up in their powers of illusion that they began to forget everything, how to fix their own machines even, and repair stuff, and they're just living their past glories in their heads. What you don't see, but you will see later, there are other aliens, which you may not like when you actually see the actual full cage, but so they captured other aliens to try and create other slave races. But that's
so in a weird way, the title Menagerie would be more fitting to the original episode, and the title The Cage would be more fitting to this one.
Yeah, kind of. It's a sort of reverse in a way, but you could apply it in there. It's because Pike is in there in a cage and he is on display, so it is kind of like he's an animal on display.
Yeah. Great themes. I really enjoyed. Something that would be explored much later, 40 years later in The Matrix, the concept of, do people want freedom or do people want safety and comfort? And the sad thing is that you can't really have both in this world. And it's nice to see that 60 years ago, people were struggling with the same problems that we are today, where it's just like, we don't know. Like, is it better to be free or to be happy?
It's pretty funny. I actually wrote down that this is just like The Matrix in some regards, because, you don't know what the heck you're looking at. I mean, you're living in this made-up illusion world in the movie The Matrix, starring Keanu Reeves or the Earl of Ted, and you have these fake a fake world. Spoiler for those who haven't seen the movie The Matrix.
Ignorance is bliss.
This is also a fake world. Those are several sets of illusions. I mean, you have no idea what's going on. They started off with the crashed ship survivors who were there with grace and dignity, as pointed out. And then we go on the illusions that Pike or memories he had, and you could see how, you could be manipulated if you have to relive similar scenes, pains, and problems. When you get to the first place, Rigel 7, which is some weird, I don't know, like fantasy castle with Susan Oliver dressed as a princess. That's kind of silly. But then you also have the one where he goes home to the city of Mojave, which is like now some sort of lush jungle, as opposed to a desert we know today. It's actually kind of funny. He goes like, I wish I had, he sees his horses, his pet horse, Tango. And he goes, oh, I wish I had some sugar. And then he finds it. He goes, oh, they think of everything. And Susan Oliver's character later goes on, listen, I don't want to talk to you about my headaches, dear. So they both know there's something up. But Pike is not 100% believing that Vina is a real person either.
Yeah,
did you think she was real?
Well, I mean, she seems like an empath. She reminded me a lot of Deanna in a lot of different ways. So she's obviously kind of in on it, and she's obviously sharing some of the powers that the Talosians have because she's able to anticipate what Pike wants. No, but I didn't get a negative, I did not get a villainous vibe from her. And, honestly, by the end of the episode, I found that the Talosians were not necessarily villainous either. In a weird way, we've seen this reversal several times. We've seen it where it's this powerful creature, alien with seemingly ill intentions. It's ultimately kind of surprisingly reasonable. We saw that last week.
They're like
with
desperate.
Dalek. Yes. And we saw it with, whatchamacallits, the Binars from season 1 TNG.
Yes, that's 01 or 11001101.
Yes.
And by the way, if you watch Star Trek stories, hey Jaron, he does the best voice
of the Binars
of that, huh?
Of the Binars?
He does. He says the title. I don't know. Now I can't get that out of my head. So head on over to Star Trek stories if you want to hear that. But that aside, the most important thing out of this which has now infested everything of Star Trek, is of course the Orion green animal woman slave.
Yeah, I didn't know that was in the cage.
Yeah, that's the only time you see them. The next time you actually see Orion women is actually in Enterprise, which is
Get out of town. Are you serious?
100%, sir. So. But there's a funny story I'll just share with you right now, even though I might say it again when we cover the cage in full, is that the people doing colors thought there was an error with the film, so they kept lightening her skin such it was like back to her normal skin tone. And so the producers thought that the camera wasn't picking up, or the director was thinking that the film wasn't picking up the green, so they kept putting on darker and darker and darker green until they went to the developer and said, like, have you been taking out the green? Yeah, we thought it was an error.
Wait a second. I thought that the cage was shot in black and white.
No, it was not. It was not just shot in black and white. It was both black and white and color.
Oh.
I think the black and white was Daly's. So the color is what they presented to NBC. They said it was too smart, is one thing. But they also pointed, that's what they say, but they also did not like the fact that Roddenberry used his side action, who's Majel Barrett in this, that's number one, as one of the stars. They actually hated her and they hated Spock. They wanted them both gone. He got rid of one, sort of. But,
why'd they get rid of number one, and why'd they get rid of Dr. Piper?
Well, Dr. Piper, I think they wanted someone else, and Dr. Piper was more comfortable doing Westerns at the time.
Sure.
I'd have to just double-check that, but they wanted someone else, so they had D. Kelly on the list, and he was next up, just like they had Bill Shatner on next after Jeff Hunter. As for getting rid of number one, It was really, they were more annoyed that it was kind of a nepotismal, or that Roddenberry was giving someone that they did not want to have it get out that he was having an affair on his then wife with her. And so they were more pissed that he was using his power as a producer kind of incorrectly. At least that's one of the stories. Roddenberry said it was like, oh, women didn't like her. It's more the first thing I said than the second thing. Speaking of women, what did you think of the Lieutenant Piper, the young yeoman, all the way back at the beginning? Did you think she was cute? Because that's not Dr. Piper's niece. She makes some snide comment about Captain Kirk, like, oh, I know this girl who's pretty much slept with you. She said so many nice things about you.
I thought she was good looking gal. I mean, she's here and gone in a second, even though she's the first person we see in the episode. So
why is she looking up at the sky though?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, there are a lot of different things I'm a little fuzzy about. Again, I don't understand why Spock. Again, did I miss something? Why there was a time crunch on this? Spock was like, "Oh, we only have this amount of time to get blank."
He was trying to. They were there. He redirected the Enterprise there by falsifying orders inside the Enterprise, because he's one of the top computer experts in the unnamed Federation. So he forged that, got him to the starbase after hearing about Captain Pike, forged the next set of orders to go to a place where he could be executed for going to. So that was the time crunch. By the way, while they're in the hearing, and again, it's not the Federation. In fact, nothing says United Federation of Planets.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing at all. It says Starfleet. The shuttlecraft even says SB for SB-11 for Starbase 11. By the way, I only know that because I have a still of it on my screen right now. But they get a message from Starfleet Command, and they actually say ComSol, as in Communications Sol System. It's not Starfleet Command.
Not only that, also Pike identifies his ship as Star Vehicle.
Space Vehicle. And he's from the United Spaceship Enterprise. And the survivors, by the way, they are from the American Continent Institute. So,
well, I figured that could have been. I mean, listen, there are people that go out into space that are not just the Starfleet. They're probably colonists, right?
Well, no, they were scientists. They were an exploratory vessel. I do like the fact that this is actually one line where we're getting towards. I think we should just keep it all as one episode, but this is split in two parts. When Kirk is technically removed from command, they still continue with the hearing, and as they're taking a break into the commercial, we get something that is actually stated to Spock, to Kirk, in a Christmas ornament. It's like, Jim, don't let them stop me. Don't let him stop me. Referring to Commodore Mendez. Very interesting, because we find out what happens to Mendez later. But we get into our part 2 of the same story.
And now, the conclusion.
Did you like the way they cut it between the two stories? Did you feel it flow normally?
Yes, at the time. When they ran credits on the first part, I was like, okay, yeah, good. I mean, I'm glad that they're not rushing. And they did not also seem to linger too long. Sometimes when you see an episode that's stretched out to 2, you're like, oh man, why is everything going so slowly? But no, it moved at a very steady pace. I liked that there were, quick developments. Like, I thought they could have wasted half the episode of Mendez and Kirk trying to get on the ship. Once they get there and Spock realizes that they don't have enough fuel to turn around, he just beams them aboard and we get right into it. So I like that they're really moving the plot along quickly. I do have to say, though, ultimately, it really is like the first episode is an episode, and then the second episode is the cage.
Yes,
most of the second episode is the cage, which is not bad. I dug it.
No, it is good. It's actually a very good story. What I do like, though, is at the beginning of the second, they have that black box scene where you have Kirk with a black background, and then you see Spock and the Commodore like at catty-corner to each other, and it goes, how do you plead? Guilty. That entire, next time on Star Trek, the original series, without Majel Barrett's voice, obviously. Right. It's a good recap of everything, and you don't get to see clips. of of what happened before, but it's a good catch up of everything that was from the prior episode. And again, by the way, this was not like filmed weeks apart. This is all done in 5 days. So that
Yeah, of course. But I mean, listen, he did a right thing, and obviously you don't need supporting characters like Sulu or Scotty to have backstories or their own B stories. You know, all the stories right there in front of you.
Scotty's actually in this for like a big like 20 seconds. He's when he's beaming in there, he beams them aboard. He's also like pissed that they can't undo their destination to Talos. He also runs the projector in the first half of the trial, but that's about it. The rest of it's just a bunch of unknown ensigns and yeomen and etc. But what did you think of the trial overall? I mean, it's a TV drama trial. Not bad for what it is. I mean, I'm not a JAG officer, but neither are you, for that matter. But for a trial, it's not bad for TV trials. What do you think? Being a specialized trial attorney like me, what do you think, Mike?
I thought it was great. I thought it was good. You know, it's a common trope that we see a few times in Star Trek. The onboard, the on-ship hearing. You know, we see that in Measure of a Man. We've seen trials in Star Trek Undiscovered Country and in Voyage Home. I always dig it when I think Star Trek works best when they're dipping their toes into another genre. You know, I like it when they do a little horror. I like it when they do a little bit of romance. Obviously, when they do a little bit of action. And, you know, I like a straight sci-fi story like anything else. But, I like it when they do a nice melange, a nice menagerie, would you say, even.
A little bit of rock and roll, a little bit of country. Yeah. So when we get into the second part, we just now are really into the cage. They basically get number one and that yeoman down, Lieutenant Cody, by the way, down to the planet. It's where Spock says his most un-Spock-like line, "The women!" I think that's one of the funniest scenes ever in all of Star Trek. That's also where you get the most kind of embarrassing thing, which is like the two extra women are down there, and the Talosian is telling them, now you have 3 women to breed with, essentially. You got the original one we showed you in the silver. You got the redhead yeoman who's got strong female drives, and you've got your executive officer who, has fantasies about you.
Oh, boy.
I was like, yeah, it's just what you need to hear, boss.
Roddenberry, you dirty, dirty man.
But, it's also a good point over here is that number one says to Vina, well, let's just do some math, shall we? You crashed here like 18 years ago? So how old would you actually be today? And that's a question that's never answered. So let's just assume that she crashed there when she was 30 or 40. So she's probably 58 or maybe even 60. Not that that's old, but they're trying to, number one is trying to point out that she doesn't look like who she seems. I mean, she's already disappeared physically from the room at one point when she's being tortured.
Yeah, but I like that the whole reveal I thought was fascinating, that it wasn't that, oh, she's old. It's that she was torn apart and they put her back together because they have power, but they don't have necessarily, just because they have power, it doesn't mean that they have wisdom, right?
They
or
have
knowledge.
No medical skill to put back a human. So she looks misshapen and deformed.
Which is such a fascinating concept where it's so horrifying too. But even I appreciate that Roddenberry was advanced enough to know, like, listen, there can be horrifying things with no malintent. You know,
That's
they weren't
true.
like, we made her ugly. Like, hey man, we had a lot of skill, and we had a lot of talent and tools, but we didn't have the know-how because we've never tried to put a human back together. So this is the best we could do, and we gave her an illusion to cover the rest.
But you know what? I also like this because that's getting towards the end, is when they get there and their weapons and all their stuff says it's not working, but it actually is working.
Yeah, that was pretty sweet.
I like that when the Talosian comes in to just leans over to try and take it. Captain Pike grabs one, turns and tries to choke the heck out of him. That's the scene where Pike basically says, like, this laser says it's empty. You want me to try that theory out on your head? And then suddenly, the hole he shot in the transparency is very, very apparent. I always thought that was funny. I was thinking, though, maybe that was an illusion, too. If you really think about it, they could have just made a further illusion where they walked through further illusions and thought they were free. Kind of like
Hey,
several other Twilight Zones. You know,
Or TNG episodes where they're stuck
Right.
in the holodeck multiple levels down. Wouldn't that be scary if everything that we've seen, all of Trek, is just a Talosian memory? It's just
It
a
could be.
Talosian illusion.
Maybe
we're all. How about this? We are in a Talosian illusion right now, and watching Star Trek is the only tiny little bit of window we have into what real reality is.
Or we're in the Matrix watching the Talosians, and it's all one big weird thing.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo. This is the world as it exists today.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
And it's
I don't know.
all turtles all the way down. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he said that, listen, statistically, we are in a simulation, for the simple fact that if there's ever a simulation, that means that's realistic. That means the inhabitants of that simulation will create simulations and so on and so forth. So there'll be 1 billion simulated realities and only one real reality. Accordingly, why would we be in the real reality? That would be a 1 in a billion chance.
Plus, you can never prove any of that. So,
Of course, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter.
The big takeaway
Nothing
from
really
this,
matters.
ladies and gentlemen, exactly. The big takeaway from this, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm stressed out about a trial tomorrow, and all these different things. The big takeaway is don't worry about it. Kick back. Nothing's important. Go get yourself a dog. That's the only thing that matters.
I don't know. After seeing your dogs, I think I'd be more stressed. I have children, but they never give me any stress.
Yes.
But you know what? I'm going to tell you, with this Illusion and Illusion, I'm going to recommend this 1997 Outer Limits episode. It's the new Outer Limits. It's called Tempests. It's where a crew member gets bitten by a spider. It's actually a little bit depressing, I will tell you that, but you can't determine whether you're watching what's actually happening or it's a toxin-induced reality. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm assuming you've never seen it, Mike.
I have not.
You can probably find it on YouTube or somewhere on the internet where
It is
all
on YouTube.
things are. Yes, it's a little disturbing, but I still recommend you watch it. I think this is where we're kind of wrapping it up, even though this is 2 episodes. We come to the end of the cage.
Listen, as Rich Evans once said, it's difficult to criticize things that are good.
That's true, and but I think you and Rich Evans should go on a date.
Oh my goodness! I'm telling you, man, when I think about
Dick the birthday boy.
No. When I think about, who, if someone's like, okay, you could have dinner with any celebrity, who is it going to be? I am seriously torn. Only 2 people come to mind, and that is David Lynch or Rich Evans. Those are the only ones. I'm not interested in anyone else.
Really? I don't know. I don't actually have anyone I really would like to just go hang out with. Actually, in my mind, I would like to go out with the actual Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. I don't know, probably because they were my childhood heroes. Maybe John Paul Jones, but he's kind of dead. But there's some things before we get to our ratings, and I think we should do 1 rating for both of these. But I'm going to just point out some interesting things. The nail polish of Majel Roddenberry. In the 50th anniversary, they actually had a whole bunch of Star Trek nail polishes. You can find them. They're actually collector's items, some of them, by MAC. So you can get that color, ladies, if you're so interested. Or guys, whichever. There's some things, though, that's the one I also point out. When they were filming this together, in the middle of it, Herb Solow, one of the producers, said, like, oh, my God, do the actors who were in the cage have the right to get money? Could they sue us? Is that a work for hire, to get kind of technical? These are questions they should have thought of before they started putting it together. Well, I will tell you, the person who was the biggest prick when it came to wanting money was, who would you guess?
Shatner.
Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy.
Really?
He wanted more and more money. Why is that? Well, you're getting my image twice. Desilu's position was, we paid you the first time. We're not going to pay you again. Well, you're paying, Jeff Hunter $5,000 in $1966. So he wanted $1,250 for the scenes
Oh,
they
just
cut
pay
of
the
him.
man.
So
Even back then, that wasn't that much.
Yeah, actually, it was $11,972 for no work of stuff that was already shown. That's not talking about his day rate on the TV show. That's for covering the stuff that was already filmed. They paid Majel Barrett $200. She's also the computer voice in this, by the way, just to let you know. But so there we are. But what's your, unless there's something specific on the story, they get away from the Talosians, and then the trial ends back in our reality, and we find out that the whole reason for it was that Pike is going to go to the Talosians to live there peacefully, so he can live in their reality, his fantasy of where he's actually able and to do things, and he actually sees Susan Oliver again. Or at least that's the implication. In fact, you see Susan Oliver walking with... Go ahead.
They really yada yada. Right, we won't do the death penalty this time. I'm like, well, that was easy.
But who sends the message saying we're not going to do the death penalty? Did you catch who sent it?
It was the Commodore.
Who was never there. He was never there on the shuttle, and he was never on the ship. That was a mind screw.
Weird. Yeah, but that was kind of a pointless. I mean, a couple of different things. One, that was kind of a pointless twist. Two, these Talosians' mental influence just expands light years.
Yep.
Like billions of miles.
Yep. They even do that in Strange New Worlds, but that also could be why they're being banned from joining the rest of society.
Wait. Yes, that was my question. Did the Talosians ever come back in Strange New Worlds?
Yeah, unfortunately. It's called If Memory Serves. Unfortunately, it stars Michael Burnham. And it does have Captain Pike in it. The problem with the Strange New Worlds and a lot of new Trek is it's like the veneer of Trek. They're trying to be Star Trek. Look, we got all the symbols and we said the places and things. Or in like the case of Lower Decks, we referenced everything 1,000 times per episode. But they don't really have the heart or the story chops. It's very explosion-y. It's more Star Wars than Star Trek, which is not a surprise since most of the writers wanted to be or have worked in Star Wars or more likely teen YA features, which is true. So they've never really done science fiction or deep stories for that matter. So it's not as good. Not even close. Yeah, so that's it. Mendez was never there. I always find that kind of bizarre. He goes, "What do you think, Commodore?" And he disappears. I kind of like, wait, what the hell was he there for then the entire time? Couldn't they come up with another illusion to get him to go there? They do address it.
Yeah, kind of pointless, but that's okay, I suppose. Wasn't the worst thing.
Yeah, but that, by the way, if we get to the what is your WTF moment in this, that's one of mine. That's one of my biggest WTF moments. Like, why was he there if he was an illusion the entire time? But it also is kind of scary because if they could make someone to interact and talk to people and... So what happened on the starbase? He go like, you know what, Jose, I'm going to see you on the shuttle deck. He goes, yeah, I'll catch you later. And he just takes off.
Yeah, very, very frightening. Again, that even back then they were getting... So, I mean, that means that these guys are almost like Q. I mean, they have mental influence throughout the galaxy. I can jump right in on my WTF moment. Was the interlude where Pike chases after and has like a little fight with that weird big barbarian giant guy. I'm like, okay.
And Rigel 7 looks like he's fighting Jaws from James Bond. Yeah.
That was obviously just something from shooting the rodeo from the cage. By the way, quick aside before we get into final scores. Didn't the same thing... I thought this was the best episode that I've seen, right? I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. And I'm going to also say that for some reason, when Star Trek is squeezed financially, and they're like, well, we only have money for this, and we need to do this, so change the story to match our funds, what's available, we get gold. Because didn't that happen with Chain of Command in TNG when Picard gets kidnapped by the Cardassians and tortured? That was like the same thing.
What, you mean like that they didn't have a lot of money type of thing?
Well, that it was turned into a 2-episode arc, and I believe that it was that they had another episode planned, but that they couldn't. They didn't have the money for it, so they just decided to cut up that one episode into two and expand on it to make it more of like a psychological drama.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what, Counselor. You can submit briefs on it for our next episode, and then we'll debate it. Because actually, I don't know about that one. I do know that it's a good two-parter, the Chain of Command from TNG. But this two-parter, I thought was a good use. The difference is that two stories. This one is reusing something, and they had an ulterior motive. But my WTF moment, the one that still drives me nuts, is when they go see Captain Pike. As opposed to everywhere else on the starbase, on every starship, he has an actual door that they open with a door handle. And you're thinking...
I didn't even notice.
The guy with the wheelchair should have a door that automatically opens. You can't... He doesn't have hands, for God's sakes. Other things that I like, besides the singing plants, they do have those again in Strange New Worlds, which are in the cage. I like the away jackets that they had when they were in the beginning. There's also, you'll see a guy with a backpack. That was actually covered by in the Star Trek annuals and like Gold Key comics, which were not done by Star Trek people. They thought everyone had these backpacks or radio backpacks. If you look very subtly at when the Talosians are stealing the captain, if you look carefully, the crew kind of looks a little beat up. They just said they were on some sort of dangerous mission. One of them even has a bandage on his neck. I'm sure that's from a shaving accident, but I think they just went with it. But that's pretty much my WTFs. I'm going to give this also a 9 out of 10. And by the way, just for the record, I'm reducing my Corbomite maneuver to an 8 out of 10, just based on this, because, I can do that.
I support that. I think I gave that 6 out of 10, right?
I think you did. Actually, I do have a very high-tech spreadsheet, and I'd like to thank... the Penske file for coming up with the idea of tracking that stuff on a spreadsheet. If you give me a moment, if the internet will allow me, I could tell you what our actual scores are, but I will tell you that we're coming in about almost about the same scores overall where we are. But let me just pull that up. But what else is going on? You said you have a trial tomorrow. What else is going on in your life?
Trying to take work less seriously.
Take what?
And actually devote work less seriously and devote more time to things like this podcast and my good buddy.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. I appreciate you and everything you do. Oh, yes. Now I know the other WTF moment. I find it really funny. You have to look really, really carefully. But if you look at it, there is a moment every time they enter the elevator on the Talosians, there's a tinkling of a bell. I find it's so ridiculous. With opening and closing chimes. You want to know what you gave the Corbomite maneuver? You gave it a 7. So I'm going to give it an 8. So far, without counting this episode, our averages are about, I'm almost at an 8. You're almost at a 6 overall in the season. But we're both giving this 9s. And how are we counting this? Is 1 episode or 2 episodes? Of course, that's a South Park quote. 1 episode.
Yeah, 1 episode.
2 at maximum when you have it. But that's the end of this one. Anything else you want to add to this, Mike?
Nope. Live long and prosper, Captain. Thank you very much. I had a great time watching this one. And where are we looking at for next week?
The next one is one with, it's called The Conscience of the King. It's a one that delves into Kirk's past, and it's not as a pretty past as one would have. It's a different episode. I will put it. It's more like a Shakespeare play, and you'll know why. And that's on our next episode of Yelling at Gaseous Anomalies. I'd like to thank you again, my number 1, for working on this and with me. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to contact us with any questions or if you want to have any comments besides liking us on YouTube and hitting that, you can also email us at yellingatgas@gmail.com. Don't forget, remember to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on Yelling at Gaseous Anomalies. Live long and prosper. Good night, Mike.
And you, sir. Good night, sir.
Wrong thinking is punishable. Right thinking will be as quickly rewarded. You will find it an effective combination.